Okay. Check, 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 check. Make sure everything's going okay. All right. Let's share out this link. Okay. Sharing this to Twitter now. Okay. So here we are. Welcome. It is Sunday night. It's a little after 9 o'clock. Whew. Oh, man. Let's see what's going on. So, yeah, welcome in. We're going to just chat about playoffs coming up, what I know, what I think I know, answer any questions. Yeah, it's crazy to think that it's already week 8, past week 8, entering week 9. We've got crossovers coming up. Yeah, so let's go down. Let's go start in the 8-man ranks. So tonight, take off the glasses. Don't have to worry about the glare. So yeah, we as you guys know, we put out our rankings and whatnot every Sunday. And yeah, as we get closer, we've been putting out the playoff projections and whatnot. And a couple of I'm talking about the 8-man rankings right now. Obviously, we had a change up at the top with DeSales beating Liberty Christian. I don't think that Liberty Christian is going to fall too far in that one. The computer dropped them down to 2. I would be very surprised if they fell further than number 2 when we get the AP poll and we get the coaches poll, because in all honesty, them going to DeSales and losing a 1-possession game where they made a huge attempt to come back in the fourth quarter. They were about just 1 possession, 1 defensive stop, and a possession away from winning that game. I don't think that you can really punish them as much as, just considering the circumstances. So yeah, we've got DeSales 1, we've got Liberty Christian 2. We go Wahkiakum 3, we've got Elmira Cooley Heartland 4. I think that's a pretty solid top 4 there. I think Wahkiakum, you've got to have one West Side team, I think, in the top 4, and I think that Wahkiakum has proven that they are the best. I think Nazell is right in there, but I would lean Elmira Cooley Heartland over Nazell. We got Nazell in the 5 seed. We've got Pomeroy 6, Darrington 7, Wilbur Crescent Keller 8. So let's go through and take a look at some of the matchups there. I've got DeSales North Beach, the 116. I've got Liberty Christian Acosta, rematch from last year in the 215. I've got Wahkiakum hosting Moses Lake Christian in the 314. I've got Elmira Cooley Heartland, Tulalip Heritage. Tulalip Heritage coming off of a loss to Nia Bay this week. In the 413, I've got Nacelle Entiat in the 512. I think that could be a really interesting game there. Entiat they've struggled at times this season, but I think that if anybody can pop up and win a game, I think it could be them. I've got Pomeroy 6 over at Nia Bay at the 11. We've got Darrington 7, Waitsburg 10. Waitsburg getting in this week. They slightly up over Odessa. Slightly up over Odessa in the projections. So we're throwing in the Cardinals. Cardinals coming in at 10th in our rankings as well. Wilbur-Crest and Keller, Garfield Palouse in the 8-9 game. Some really interesting matchups there. Let's see. Yeah, so one of the things that is different about this year's rankings, I don't know if I've really explained how different this year's rankings are. So in the past, we'd post our stuff, and week 1 you'd see, like this year, O'Day, Graham Kapowsin. You'd see somebody like Graham Kapowsin lose, and then they would be ranked like 45th or something like that. This year, what I decided to do is I kind of added a projection model in there as well. So we have 2 different rankings going. We've got what you've done, and then you've also got what the computer thinks you're going to do, which is kind of a mix of what my computer thinks, my rankings, along with some other predictive models. Like I use Max Preps' stuff. I use some other predictive things in there, and just kind of squash them all together to kind of predict how the computer thinks the season's going to play out. And so the rankings that you've seen over the course of the year have been essentially after week 10, simulating up to week 10, and then what the computer has right there. So that's why you would look at 2A, for example, and you'd see somebody like Seaholm at 13, or for the longest time, Archbishop Murphy was outside of the top 10 because, they were undefeated at that time, but the computer thought that at the time they were going to lose to Anacortes, or thought they were going to lose to Linden, or even Seaholm at some times. So that's kind of where you see some of the changes there. Let's see. Curious who we will draw in week 10. So we'll go up to 2A. So East Valley of Yakima is a very, very interesting. I think they have a very interesting resume. I think that their ceiling is probably 3rd. That's where the computer has them right now. I think that their floor is probably 6. I'm going to go back to week. Let's see. I'm going to go back to the projections going into week 10. So I think a good range is probably 3 to 6 for East Valley of Yakima. And it's not necessarily a slight at what they've done, because an undefeated run through the EWAC or through the CWAC is always it's a really tough task. And if anybody knows, it's somebody who's been down there. But I look at East Valley comparatively to, like, say, Tumwater. I think if I'm going, obviously, Archbishop Murphy, East Valley, I'd go Archbishop Murphy. I think if I go Tumwater, East Valley, I'd probably go Tumwater. Anacortes, East Valley, I'd probably lean Anacortes. Linden, East Valley, I'd probably go Linden. So right there, you're kind of in the 5 slot already. Now you're starting to get into teams like Orting and WF West and Olympic. And that's kind of where I think I could see them slotting 5, 6, 7, 8 right in there. So you're probably looking for, across the bracket in week 10, you're probably looking at like a lower seeded Greater Spokane League team, maybe like a Pullman. You could be looking at one of the D2 teams, maybe Renton, Sultan, somewhere in there, depending on who gets through. Bremerton could be one that you see. maybe Fife. I could even see a thing where you're matched up against East Valley Spokane in the old East Valley Bowl there. Yeah, I think probably in the 5, 6, 7 range for East Valley of Yakima. But no matter what, yeah, exactly. Like you said, you'll be hosting, no doubt. And in that 5, 6, 7 slot, you know that you're going to get a week 10 home game and more than likely a round of 16 home game as well. Oh boy. Yeah, so it's always fun. It's one of the reasons why I love doing this, because last year I traveled over RPI. Yeah, well, RPI don't. That's not something to base your stuff off of, because the RPI. I mean, it's I don't want to crap on the RPI, because I love that we have some metrics that are out there, but the thing is RPI doesn't work with football. There's not enough data. You know, um, there's not enough crossover between teams. Like, yeah, unfortunately, down here in the Tri Cities, for example, the Mid Columbia Conference, they just play within their conference, and the Greater Spokane League, they just play within their conference. So, how are you supposed to see what a league strength is if they're just contained to, the league that they play in? It's the argument that we had about the 4A SPSL for years. Rylan Spencer and I, yeah, exactly. Rylan Spencer and I used to talk about this all the time on our podcast back in the day. We wanted to see the SPSL split so that these teams could have the opportunity to go out and schedule other teams and other leagues, and we could kind of get a gauge as to where they actually fit in the hierarchy of the 4A classification. And speaking of that, that kind of goes to another topic that I wanted to talk about. One of the things that is criminal with my computer rankings is Royal is always underseeded. We all know that Royal is the best team in 1A. It's just, we know that. But Royal always pops up at like 3, 4, 5 in the computer rankings. And every single time I just what can you do? That's where it has them. We know what they are. Unfortunately, they are also victim to their league. In the SCAC, they only have one non-league game. Royal did a great job the last 2 years scheduling it against Prosser. So, very strong opponent there. But then they get handcuffed when they have to play, the Natchez Valley. I don't know, Natchez Valley isn't too bad this year, but the Wapatos and the college places and Kaibi and Wahluke and just the schools that aren't football powerhouses. They're not going to be 500 teams. Those anchors really drag down their strength of schedule. Whereas the Northwest Conference, Linden Christian, Nooksack Valley, Mount Baker, all those schools are all really high because they have their schedule is pretty much just winning team, winning team, winning team, winning team, winning team, and then their 4 league opponents. I mean, you look at Nooksack Valley just played Montesano this last week. After having played, they played Kings earlier this year. It's just there's no reason for them to be. The computer's always going to love a strength of schedule like that when it matters so much when it factors so much in the ranking. Excuse me. So, yeah, just another thing. Royal there. Gotta love it. Okay, let's see. Does your ranking include points per game? Ooh, that's a really good question. The question is, does your ranking include points per game, or is it just win-losses for opponent? So the ranking used to include points. One of the factors was what we called points percentage. So it was basically how many points you scored divided by the total number of points scored in the game. So obviously, if you shut out a team, then that factor, which I think was like 20% at one point, you would get a full 20% of that 1 point to your ranking. This year, I'm not factoring in points at all. We are factoring in win-loss over an opponent. We're factoring in league strength. We're factoring in opponent's league strength. We're factoring in just kind of, team strength. There's a few different things that we're kind of, we're kind of experimenting with this year to kind of keep it from being, I wanted it to look normal from week 1, as opposed to having these, teams that we all know are top 10 teams be in like the 40s and 50s just because they had an early season loss. So that does not have anything to do with it this year. I'd be interested after the season is over to go back, and I like to run season simulations in the summer to kind of identify mistakes and figure out how to fix them. I'd like to go back and maybe add in the points and kind of see how that, if that points percentage how that would change things. I don't think I want to bring it back because, in all honesty, like, I think it's not time efficient to wait for a final score. Basically, if I know that a team's going to win a game, it's easier to just say, okay, that game's over, and put in the result, move on, instead of getting down to the nitty gritty and going, okay, it's 41-7 with 2 minutes left, but the losing team has the ball. We got to see if they score. It's not time efficient for that. So that's why we don't do that again or anymore. So yeah, let's go down and take a look. Unless we get, obviously, if anybody has any questions, please send them. I will. I'd love to. It's one of the reasons I love doing this. Is just the discussion factor. It's let's get the attention on the kids. Quarterly scores would be interesting. I remember the old Continental Basketball Association up here would have, you'd get points for winning the quarter. So like I want to say it was like there were 6 possible points in a game. Like you'd get like a point for winning versus for outscoring in each quarter, and then 2 points if you won the game or something like that. And they used it as like a tiebreaker or something. It was a long time ago. I was very, very young when that was happened. But see, I think that'd be cool. Like some of the metrics, like I really would love to be able to incorporate would be like, I'd love to be able to do quarterly scores. I think I'd try to figure out how to use that. But I'd love to be able to have access to like team stats. So like rushing yards, passing defense, all that stuff. I'd love to have a database that had that, because I'd love to put in like an offensive and defensive efficiency sort of stat to kind of, because that's, I mean, if you look at like one of my favorite college football rankings is Kelly Ford's rankings. If you don't follow Kelly Ford, at K Ford rankings on Twitter, he does just fantastic work. But a lot of those power ranking sites do have like an offensive efficiency factor and a defensive efficiency factor, and I'd love to be able to figure out a way to incorporate that in the high school football. Yeah, I could go to Max Preps for quarterly scores, but until I figure out how I would want them to affect, how I would want them to incorporate them in the rankings, I'm not exactly sure. I wouldn't want to waste the time going and tracking those down until I had those, for Max Preps for stats. See, the problem with that is like Max Preps is a good spot for stats, but not everybody puts in their stats. There's some teams where, you can go look and it'll give you the stats tab, but you have one kid who has 5 carries and that's everything that's put in there. So I don't know. That's one thing I'd love to push for in the next few years. Maybe not next year, maybe not the following year, but in the next 5 years, I'd love to figure out a way to make it easier for coaches for us to have access to a centralized stats database. Now, I mean, I know that some coaches are they don't want to have their stats getting out there because, they think that teams are going to use that to game plan against them. But in all honesty, you're already sending your film. So, I mean, teams are going to know how to game plan against you. So why not share the stats? And if we have a central thing like that, I would absolutely figure out how to use that to make the rankings better. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's all I want to do is like, I know my rankings aren't perfect and I just want to make them the best they can. And if I can figure out a way to, yeah, exactly. Almost every film is online anyway. Exactly. Like, exactly. So why withhold stats it's not just hurting you, it's hurting your players. Your players aren't getting the recognition that they could be getting. It could affect their all-state status. It could affect their recruiting, for goodness sake. If you've got a kid who's got, you know, 50 catches on the season, for teams to be able to, for colleges to be able to find it, then you're only hurting your athletes. So I know, but on the other hand, I know that it's time consuming to be able to tabulate that stuff up. So I don't want to put that on the coaches. I know they already have a lot on their hands. But some cool things as well in the last few days. Speaking of recruiting, in the last few days, Air Force's recruiting Twitter account has followed Evan's rankings. So, I'm going to be putting a lot more emphasis on tweeting out film that I see and just getting kids looked at. Central's director of recruiting just shot me a follow like in the last hour or so. So we're just doing what we can to get the kids out there. Yeah, let's see. Oh no, that wasn't him. Where did that one go? There he is. Yeah, 37 minutes ago, chief of staff recruiting coordinator for Central shots follow. So when I say I want to get kids looked at, we're gonna get them looked at. So, anyways, yeah. Anybody else? Thank you for being here. Does anybody else have any questions here? And then I'll leave it open for the next 5 minutes or so, and then we'll call it a night and get ourselves ready for week 9. Yeah, exactly. That is correct. That is Coach Brady that gave me a follow. Let's see. Okay, I'll answer that. Yeah, I'm. Yeah, it's pretty exciting to be able to actually share film and tell the kids like, yeah, will actually have people that are following that do recruiting stuff. So yeah, really exciting for that. Oh man, let's see. So let's talk really quickly while we're leaving the floor open for any questions here in the next couple minutes. This week, huge games going on. The one that I'm going to be at, 6 Kids Offered. Awesome. I'm glad here. I'm so excited to see what East Valley's done this year. We've been watching it over the last couple of years, just watching the program just kind of build and build and build to this point. And, I was really excited to. I've been following the basketball program a little bit more. They've been identified in in our projected rankings, like all the last few years. They've always been a team that I've kind of wanted to look out for, and so I'm really excited that things are going well up there in Moxie. Good program, finally getting some success. Yeah, this week, Thursday night, I'll be at Fran Ridge Stadium for Kamaikan and Richland. Basically, the winner. Stakes are high in that game. The winner gets a bid to round of 16. The loser has to turn around and play against Lewis and Clark on Tuesday night. I don't know if that's here in the Tri-Cities or if that's in Spokane, but obviously I don't want to have to play in that turnaround game. Both of those teams, just Kamaikan just coming off a huge win over Kennewick, playing with a backup quarterback too. That was the thing that was much more impressive to me, is just how composed the quarterback played against Kennewick's really, really stout defense. And Richland, coming off of a really tough loss to Chiawana, they were in that game. They actually had a lead for a while. And yeah, senior night at Richland, so it should be perfect. Okay. Sorry, getting messages about crossovers and whatnot, seating committee questions. So anyways, all right, well, I'm going to end it here. I think maybe we'll come back again next Sunday and do something like this again. I'll do some more advertising over the week. So anyways, have a great week, and feel free, if you've got any questions, shoot them to me on Twitter. I'm always, I'll always answer questions. I don't ever, it's never a bother. I'm still trying to understand stuff. I know everyone else is trying to understand stuff as well, and we're all just kind of trying to figure out who's supposed to be where. Hopefully soon we'll have an answer on the 3A allocation fiasco that's going on. If you haven't been following, there's some confusion amongst leagues in the 3A classification about bids. I think some people have flipped last year's bids and this year's bids, and that's we're still working on things behind the scenes, but hopefully I'll get answers and figure out exactly who. Essentially, the Metro thinks that they have one more bid than I think they're getting, but get it figured out. We'll figure that in the morning. So, anyways, have a great night. If you have any questions or comments or anything like that, obviously shoot me a message. Direct message is fine. Post on the page over there on Twitter. I don't know. There may be some more stuff coming here on the YouTube side of it. I don't know. We're just, I'm still kind of learning about that. But, anyways, hope everybody has a good night, and we will catch you next week and throughout the week. Good night.